If your French Bulldog refuses to get off the couch when you call them, they aren't being stubborn. They're actually telling you that your relationship contract is broken.
All right, it's a total breakdown in communication.
Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome, everyone, to today's deep dive. We are examining a really fascinating transcript from the Vital Pet podcast, specifically Season 8, Episode 6, which analyzes French Bulldog behavior and trainability.
Yeah, it's a great source.
It really is. But our mission today goes way beyond standard dog training. We're going to dismantle a massive misconception about animal behavior that, frankly, fundamentally changes how we think about motivation, intelligence, and communication, and we're using the French Bulldog as our lens to do it.
Which is such a good focal point.
Exactly. And I want to tell you right up front, even if you don't own a dog, this deep dive is a masterclass in recognizing how labeling someone or something as stubborn might actually just be a total failure to understand their core motivations.
I mean, it serves as a perfect case study in misdiagnosis, really. We observe a behavior that inconveniences us, we slap a convenient label on it based on our own assumptions, and we completely miss the underlying biological reality of what is actually happening right in front of us.
Right. And the biggest label slapped on this specific breed is the word stubborn.
Oh, absolutely.
It's treated like a defining personality trait. It's almost like a badge of honor for owners who joke about their incredibly stubborn Frenchie. But looking closely at the source material, applying the concept of stubbornness here is factually incorrect when you trace the dog's evolutionary history.
Yeah, the problem with the word stubborn is that it implies a very specific, almost adversarial cognitive process.
Like they're doing it on purpose?
Exactly. It implies that the dog fully comprehends the cue you're giving them, they understand the desired outcome, and they are making a willful, defiant choice to refuse you. But the Vital Pet source points out that this framework completely ignores what French Bulldogs were bred to do.
Which is not to work independently.
Right. They were never developed to be independent workers. You are not dealing with a herding dog bred to follow complex whistle commands across a windy valley, or a sporting brood engineered to retrieve game for a handler all day.
So those working breeds are essentially independent contractors.
Yeah.
If we think about this like moving to a new apartment, the working breed is the professional moving company you hired. They derive their internal dopamine hit from the task itself.
They want to do the job.
Yeah, they genuinely want to lift the heavy boxes and put them in the truck because they find the mechanics of the job inherently rewarding.
Right.
But a French Bulldog is like your best friend who agreed to help you move. They don't have a deep inherent love for lifting cardboard boxes. They're there entirely because they value their relationship with you.
That is such a spot-on analogy.
Right, because if you start barking orders at your friend, offering no warmth, no please, and no slice of pizza at the end, your friend is going to sit down on the couch and refuse to lift another box. They aren't being stubborn. The social contract of the relationship has been violated.
Yeah, and that analogy perfectly isolates the difference between a dog's willingness and a dog's capability. People consistently conflate the two.
They think the dog just doesn't get it.
Exactly. When a Frenchie disengages, the owner assumes the dog either isn't smart enough to learn the command or is actively rebelling. But the source data shows French Bulldogs are highly intelligent. I mean, they excel at pattern recognition, they problem solve in ways that often surprise their owners, and they're brilliant at reading environmental shifts.
So capability isn't the issue at all.
Not at all. Capability is not the bottleneck. The bottleneck is willingness, which is governed entirely by their relationship-first wiring. You have to remember, they were bred for centuries solely for companionship. Proximity to humans is their evolutionary purpose.
So they're essentially asking, what's in it for the relationship, instead of just what's in it for the treat?
That's exactly it. When a training session feels purely transactional or, endlessly repetitive or devoid of warmth, a breed wired for social connection will genuinely just lose interest.
And then that disengagement gets mislabeled.
Right, it gets mislabeled as stubbornness, when in reality it's just a mismatch between the human's mechanical training approach and the dog's actual evolutionary motivation.
Okay, so if the relationship is their primary currency, they need a way to audit the health of that currency at all times. And the source material describes them as walking emotional barometers.
Which is a great way to put it.
Yeah, they aren't just sitting there waiting for a command. They are actively gathering data, on the human's physiological and emotional state.
They operate like highly tuned satellite dishes for human neurochemistry and microexpressions. I mean, they possess an extreme emotional sensitivity. They accurately decode tone of voice, slight shifts in body language, and the overarching atmospheric mood of the household.
Like they know when you've had a bad day at work before you even take your coat off because they are reading the tension in your shoulders and the pitch of your voice.
Absolutely. And you see this data processing reflect instantly in their physical behavior. The source highlights that they will become noticeably subdued, retreating or moving slowly during tense moments in the house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Conversely, when the household mood lifts and the energy becomes light and positive, they become visibly buoyant and playful. Their internal state is inextricably tethered to your external state.
Wait, I have to challenge this based on what we just established.
Okay, go for it.
If they are so incredibly sensitive to human frustration, and their biological imperative is to ensure the relationship remains harmonious, wouldn't a harsh correction make them more eager to comply?
Ah.
Like if my dog senses I'm angry, wouldn't their instinct be to immediately sit down or obey just to fix my mood and restore the peace?
What's fascinating here is that the exact opposite happens, and it really comes down to how their nervous system processes threats. Because of that profound sensitivity, harsh corrections, loud frustrations, or any dominance-based training methodologies actually trigger a massive backfire. Applying pressure to a dog wired for companionship doesn't snap them into cooperative obedience.
It freaks them out.
It floods them with cortisol. It makes them intensely anxious. They withdraw and shut down because the emotional environment has just become profoundly unsafe for a creature whose primary survival mechanism is social harmony.
Wow. So relying on positive reinforcement isn't just a modern ethical preference for this breed. It is quite literally a neurological requirement.
Yes.
Dominance theory simply doesn't compute for them.
Not at all. Positive reinforcement is the only language their temperament truly understands. Rewarding the target behavior with warmth, encouragement, and genuine connection produces consistent, lasting results because it aligns perfectly with what they were bred to seek.
Right.
Dominance-based thinking is poorly suited to most domestic dogs anyway, but it completely falls apart with a French Bulldog. You aren't asserting authority. You are just destroying the trust they rely on to function.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. If a dog is evolutionarily engineered to require your physical presence, and their entire nervous system is constantly taking the emotional temperature of the room, what happens when you remove that presence entirely?
Yeah, that's the catch.
Like when you grab your keys and leave for the grocery store, you aren't just leaving the house, you are removing their entire regulatory system.
You are pointing straight to the dark side of that deep connection, which manifests as separation anxiety. And this is incredibly common with this breed. Because they are so deeply people-oriented, many Frenchies form intense, profound attachments to their primary caregivers.
Which sounds incredibly endearing until you actually have to leave for an 8-hour workday.
Right, exactly. For a dog built this way, being left alone isn't merely inconvenient or, slightly boring. It can become a source of genuine, acute distress. From an evolutionary standpoint, a companion animal separated from its human is experiencing an existential threat.
And the source specifically warns owners not to brush this off with casual labels. Calling the dog clingy completely minimizes the biological panic they might be experiencing.
Dismissing it as clinginess is just another form of misdiagnosis that negatively impacts the dog's welfare. True separation anxiety presents through clear behavioral markers around departures.
Like what?
Severe restlessness, pacing, destructive chewing, and vocalizations like crying or barking that are tied exclusively to your abscesses.
Because the human is the anchor. When the anchor vanishes, the dog drifts into a panic state. So how does an owner build independence in an animal whose DNA screams for proximity?
It requires proactive, systematic work, ideally initiated during puppyhood.
Yeah.
You have to build comfortable independence gradually.
So starting really small.
Very small. This means practicing incredibly short departures, sometimes just stepping out the door and returning a few seconds later, to teach their nervous system that being alone is both safe and temporary. You slowly increase the duration only as the dog remains under threshold.
That makes sense.
However, the source is emphatic on this point. If the distress is intense, if these patterns of vocalization and panic are frequent, owners really must consult a veterinarian or a qualified canine behavior professional. Severe separation anxiety responds very well to a structured, professional desensitization protocol, but it is never something an owner should just ignore, hoping the dog will eventually grow out of it.
Let's expand this out from the living room for a second. We've established their internal world, their intelligence, and this hyper-attachment to their primary person. What is the ripple effect of this wiring when they encounter the rest of the world?
Oh, that's a great question.
I'd imagine this sensitive, companionship-driven nature dictates how they interact with kids, other pets, and chaotic environments like dog parks.
It absolutely translates into a profound need for thoughtful, managed social dynamics. Generally speaking, French Bulldogs are wonderful with children. They're affectionate, remarkably patient, and they readily form close bonds with younger family members. But we have to return to the concept of the emotional barometer.
Right. The sensitivity works in both directions. If they absorb the calm energy of a household, they must also absorb the chaotic energy of a toddler.
Exactly. A French Bulldog will instantly pick up on chaotic or overly rough interactions. The high-pitched screaming, the erratic running, and the sudden movements that are entirely normal for young children can deeply overwhelm the dog's sensory processing.
So they get stressed out.
Very stressed. Teaching children to interact calmly and respectfully is vital, not just for safety, but to protect the dog from chronic emotional stress.
I would assume this sensory overload applies to introducing them to other animals as well.
Yeah, they are naturally sociable with other dogs and often other species like cats. But the introductions must be handled thoughtfully and gradually. A calm, well-managed introduction allows the Frenchie to read the new animal's social cues accurately.
This highlights a massive trap for owners of friendly breeds. It is so easy to think, oh, Frenchies love everybody, I'll just drop them in the middle of a crowded dog park and let them work it out.
Rushing introductions assumes that a naturally friendly temperament doesn't require active management. Throwing a highly sensitive dog into a chaotic, unregulated environment is a recipe for behavioral fallout. It creates totally avoidable friction because you're overloading their ability to process social data.
So does this mean socialization is something you have to actively manage their whole life, rather than just checking a box when they're a puppy? Like, they met a cat, a mailman, and a bicycle at 12 weeks, so we're good forever.
No, not at all. Socialization is a perishable skill. While the early puppy months are a critical developmental window, ongoing exposure is mandatory well into adulthood.
Good to know.
Yeah, exposing them gently to new people, varying environments, and novel situations helps maintain their confidence. Because they are so emotionally sensitive, they require continued low-pressure social experiences throughout their lives to remain adaptable and resilient.
I want to focus on everyday life at home now, because the source material points out that when owners fail to grasp everything we've just discussed, the sensitivity, the hyper-attachment, the need for managed socialization, they end up misinterpreting their dog's emotional needs as random, bad behavior.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the root of most household frustration really comes down to decoding unmet needs. A defining trait of the French Bulldog is that they retain a notably playful, almost puppyish energy well into adulthood.
Which goes against the stereotype. There is this idea that they're just lazy potatoes that sleep on velvet pillows all day. But that's not actually how they are wired.
Not at all. I mean, they certainly enjoy resting, but regular engaged play is crucial for their emotional regulation. When they're deprived of that engagement, they become distinctly restless.
Right.
The source describes a very specific behavioral loop. The dog pacing, following the owner from room to room, seeking attention repeatedly, and showing mild frustration during what the owner thinks should be a quiet evening.
Everyone knows a dog that does this. You sit down to watch a movie and the dog is just staring at you, sighing, pacing back and forth, pawing at your leg.
Yes, and owners frequently misread this pacing. They assume it's a medical issue or a sudden training regression where the dog has forgotten how to settle on their mat. But more often than not, it's simply a dog whose fundamental need for genuine, connected interaction hasn't been met that day.
It's an emotional need.
Exactly. The restlessness is an emotional function, not just the surplus of physical energy that needs to be burned off with a long run.
The source makes a brilliant distinction here between passive presence and engaged play. Sitting on the couch, scrolling on your phone while your dog is asleep on the floor next to you, that is passive presence.
Yeah.
You are physically sharing a room, but you are completely disconnected.
Totally disconnected.
But engaged play is putting the phone in another room, getting down on the floor, making direct eye contact, and playing tug-of-war for 10 minutes. And what's amazing is that a Frenchie doesn't usually need 2 hours of this. Just a few minutes of intense, focused attention resolves the restlessness completely.
Because that focused attention satisfies the core motivation we've been analyzing since the beginning, the relationship. And this is also why mental stimulation is so profoundly effective for them.
Like puzzle toys.
Yeah, puzzle feeders, introducing novel scents, or running through short training sessions. These aren't just parlor tricks to make the dog look smart. For a breed developed to prioritize human closeness, a short, positive training session functions as an emotional bonding activity.
It's quality time. You're solving a puzzle together.
Exactly. And it is also why they thrive on predictable routines. People often assume that an affectionate, adaptable companion dog doesn't require the rigid structure a working dog might need. But a dog this finely attuned to the emotional rhythm of the house actually relies on clear, consistent patterns and steady expectations to feel secure.
Which brings up a fascinating trap that owners fall into, specifically because this breed is so sweet-natured.
Yes, this raises an important question about how we view affection. There is a widespread, massive misconception that because a dog is deeply affectionate, they are automatically easy to train, without the owner having to put in any real effort.
Like, he loves me so much, he just naturally wants to be a good boy.
Right. But affection and trainability are entirely separate metrics. Skipping consistent guidance just because the dog is sweet leaves massive gaps in their manners, which eventually leads to friction in the household.
The greeting behavior mentioned in the source is the perfect mechanism to explain this. The classic scenario: guests come over, and the Frenchie loses their mind at the front door, jumping all over everyone.
I've seen it.
Yeah. Because the dog is small, friendly, and visibly thrilled, the owner assumes this overenthusiasm is just a phase that will mellow out over time. They don't implement any consistent boundaries.
And then the behavior persists and often escalates because the dog is actively being rewarded for the jumping. From the human's perspective, they might be pushing the dog off, stepping away and yelling, "No, down, bad dog." But we have to look at what the dog is actually receiving in that moment.
Which is attention. If their currency is connection, then even negative attention pays the bills. By pushing them and yelling, you are giving them physical touch, eye contact, and vocal engagement.
Exactly. It creates a self-reinforcing loop. The dog learns that jumping is a highly effective strategy for harvesting interaction from humans.
So if negative attention is still a reward, the only logical fix is to completely starve the bad behavior of that connection. You have to literally turn your back, withhold the relationship by avoiding eye contact and touch, and only dispense your attention when all four paws are firmly on the floor.
Yes, that's the only way.
You patiently and repeatedly reward the calm behavior, teaching them that sitting quietly is the new mechanism for earning the connection they value so highly.
You are fundamentally changing the terms of the interaction to align with their internal motivations.
So what does this all mean? When we pull all these threads together, what is the ultimate takeaway from this deep dive into the French Bulldog's mind?
The core takeaway is that successful training, and really a successful coexistence with this breed, begins entirely with understanding, not correction. A French Bulldog that feels genuinely connected to its person and is guided with patience, predictable routines, and positive reinforcement is remarkably cooperative.
That's reassuring.
It is. The dogs that get labeled as difficult, spiteful, or stubborn are almost universally dogs whose relationship-driven motivation just hasn't been recognized or utilized by the human at the other end of the leash.
It's all about learning to speak their language rather than forcing them to speak ours. And of course, as the source notes, all of this analysis is for educational purposes. If you are ever seeing behavior that concerns you or sudden inexplicable changes in your dog's temperament, you should always consult your veterinarian to rule out underlying health issues first.
Definitely. Physical discomfort, especially in a breed prone to certain health challenges, can very easily mask itself as behavioral resistance or sudden stubbornness.
But assuming health is clear, understanding this motivational framework really does change everything. And for you listening, whether you are dealing with a French Bulldog, a different breed entirely, or frankly a coworker or a family member, this deep dive proves something profound.
It really does apply broadly.
Yeah. Whenever we face resistance, before we throw our hands up and lazily label someone as stubborn, we need to audit the underlying relationship. We need to investigate what actually motivates them. Usually the resistance is a failure of our own communication, not a failure of their willingness.
Shifting your perspective from demanding compliance to understanding motivation changes the entire dynamic of any relationship.
It really does. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over today, something that builds on everything we've unpacked. We learned from the transcript today that French Bulldogs are constantly reading their owner's tone, body language, and the household mood to dictate their own behavior.
Huh.
They are finely tuned emotional barometers.
Right.
So here is the provocative thought: who is really training who? If your dog's mood and behavior are simply a mirror of your own emotional atmosphere, are you actually training the dog? Or is the dog simply giving you real-time, undeniable feedback on the energy you are putting into the room?
Wow, that is a mirror we could all benefit from looking into.
Until next time, keep diving deep.